In Module 3, we will discuss the structure, the function, and the physiology of the blood vessels. So any circulatory system, that is man-made circulatory system or biological circulatory system, consists of three basic components: a pump, a series of pipes, and a fluid. So in biological circulatory systems, we saw that the fluid is blood, the pump is the heart, and the pipes are the blood vessels. The pipes of man-made circulatory systems are rigid, usually made of metal or plastics. On the other hand, the pipes or the blood vessels that make up the cardiovascular system are not rigid. We see that biological pipes, like blood vessels, can constrict or they can relax, which helps to alter both blood pressure and blood flow. We also see that blood vessels can create new blood vessels in a process that is called angiogenesis. Humans have an impressive amount of blood vessels in their body. We have about 60,000 miles of blood vessels in total. And this image here is showing a plastic cast of only the blood vessels with all of the other tissues removed. So hopefully this diagram here gives you an appreciation for just how many blood vessels the human body contains within it. So let's take a look at the basic types of blood vessels. There are three that we'll take a look at. We have the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. So arteries will always carry blood away from the heart. And we can think of arteries as the vessels that are supplying blood to the body's major organs and tissues. We see that arteries start out large at the heart, and they branch and get smaller in diameter as they get further from the heart, and they tend to fan out to serve all of the body's tissues. Veins, on the other hand, will carry blood back towards the heart, and we see that veins, we can think of veins as the structures that are draining the body's organs. We see that veins from major organs tend to start out fairly small, and they merge and converge with one another, get larger in diameter as they get closer to the heart. And finally, capillaries are small diameter vessels that function as exchange vessels. So capillaries are always situated between arteries and veins. And capillaries maintain very close contact with all of the body's tissues, and they act as sites of delivery for oxygen and nutrients. And they're also removing wastes as well. Let's take a look at the basic structure of blood vessels. So all vessels, except for the capillaries, have three layers that are referred to as tunics. So the layers of these tunics are as follows. We see the tunica intima, which is the deepest set of layers of the blood vessels, the tunica media, which is the middle layer, and the tunica externa, which is the externalmost set of tunics or layers. And generally what we'll see is that these tunics have multiple layers. One structure here to point out, or one item here to point out, is the lumen of the blood vessels. And the lumen is the blood-containing space that's found in the middle of the vessels. So this is where the blood would be located. The exception to the three-layer tunic structure of the blood vessels would be the capillaries. The capillaries are pretty much just made of a layer of simple squamous epithelium that are referred to as the endothelial cells. So these are the cells that line the walls of the capillaries. And they have a protein basement membrane that helps to attach them to nearby structures. So the first set of layers that we will examine in the arteries and in the veins will be the tunica intima. This is the inner layer, the innermost layer that is in close or intimate contact with the blood. The first of these layers of the tunica intima is the endothelium. The endothelium of the tunica intima, just like we saw in capillaries, is a simple squamous epithelium. Its function here is to minimize friction for blood that is moving through it, and it also reduces the turbulence of the blood. So recall that when blood flow slows and becomes more turbulent, that is when clots form. And so this smooth lining of the endothelium helps to prevent unwanted clot formation. The next layer is the subendothelial layer, which is typically found in vessels that are larger than 1 millimeter in diameter. It consists of a basement membrane, so just like we saw in the capillaries, and it also consists of a layer of a loose connective tissue, which is not really very well described in most texts, but it is most likely an areolar connective tissue. In the arteries, we also see a third layer that belongs to the tunica intima. It's called the internal elastic membrane. As its name implies, it contains elastic connective tissue. And we see that the presence of elastic connective tissue in the arteries, but we don't see that in the veins, helps to explain why arteries are much more elastic and much more stretchy than the veins are. So notice that the veins are lacking an internal elastic membrane, but they do have a subendothelial layer and an endothelium. Next is the tunica media, and the tunica media is the middle set of layers that are seen in both arteries and veins. It consists primarily of smooth muscle arranged in circular bundles. And in the arteries, but not the veins, there is another layer of elastic connective tissue in the tunica media that is called the external elastic membrane. The sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system controls the smooth muscle that's found in the tunica media of both arteries and veins, and the smooth muscle here can help create vasoconstriction and vasodilation to control both blood flow and blood pressure. The final and the most superficial or external of the blood vessel tunics is the tunica externa. So in both veins and arteries, this layer consists primarily of collagen fibers, and these fibers help to protect the vessels. They help to reinforce the walls of the blood vessels so that they do not rupture, and they also help to anchor the blood vessels to nearby structures. So in large diameter vessels, like large diameter arteries, large veins, the tunica externa also contains a small network of blood vessels that is called the vasa vasorum, which this phrase literally means the vessels of the vessels. So the vasa vasorum are blood vessels that nourish the external tissues of the large vessels, because the thick walls of the large diameter vessels are much too thick for the blood that is in the lumen of those vessels to nourish the outer layers.